Welcome. Today we're going to be doing a simple practice for beginners. We're going to do some high lunging, some warrior twoing, and some forward folding. So helpful to have a couple of blocks at the ready at the top of your mat, one on each side, and something to sit on to start practice. So a blanket, maybe two. So we're going to start in a cross-legged seat. And when you set up in your cross-legged seat, you want to try to have a puppy by your side, but probably maybe not quite as important, but just as useful to have your knees not too high above the level of your hips. And so if you can imagine my knees being pretty high, it would kind of push me backwards, which is more effort to sit upright than we would like to in the beginning of class. So stack your blankets up nice and high if you need to. And we'll start with the hands placed on the thighs, the eyes closed, and just kind of checking in with the breath. And as you check in with the breath, just kind of notice where your energetic level is at right now. You feeling, relatively ready for physical practice? Are you feeling a little lethargic? Is there a lot of expectation around practice? Or do you have specific goals of what you are trying to get out of this? Or is it sort of more kind of like, I just want to move my body and explore? And if there is a goal attached to your yoga practice, and that could be a wide variety of goals, see if you can both see that goal, but also to not have too much attachment to the goal, right? So in yoga, we work with this idea of non judgment, non attachment. And so that goes for progress or discomfort or flexibility is usually a big one that people have some attachment to in yoga, wanting to touch their toes or wanting to straighten their legs in downward dog, etc. So see if you can just maybe in this practice not try to necessarily remove attachment, but perhaps just notice when it comes up really clearly, right? So it's really difficult to practice one of the yogic philosophies like non-attachment or impermanence without first noticing what your baseline is or what your kind of natural inclination is. And so in today's practice, just maybe notice like, what am I really attached to in this practice? What goals am I really attached to? What sensations am I really attached to? And just use it as a little bit of data collection. All right, so let's start moving the spine a little bit. So you can go ahead and slide your hands forward onto your knees or kneecaps around your spine. You're going to use your arms a little bit as an anchor, right? So the elbows can straighten. The knees will likely lift a good bit actually as you rock back towards your sacrum and drop your head, right? And that allows your spine to open and lengthen. Maybe even find a little bit of kind of lower belly hugging into the organs. So for a gentle encouragement for the pelvis to also participate in this rocking back or cat spine action. And then as you inhale, do the opposite. So you're going to rock forward toward your pubic bone. You can use your hands on your legs to sort of pull your chest forward and up. The elbows might need to bend a little bit. And see if as you do that, you can feel your shoulder blades coming back toward your spine, but trying to watch how high the shoulders raise to the ears or rise to the ears. You want to try to keep the shoulders kind of relatively kind of mid-level, so not shoved down the back nor rising up towards the ears, but sort of just retracting straight back towards the spine. Maybe you look the face up towards the ceiling, maybe you don't. It kind of just depends on like where you're at, how heavy your head feels. And then let's go back to cat spine. So you're rounding back, holding onto your knees as an anchor point, hugging the low belly in a smidge just to help the pelvis curl, help the spine curl. And then as you inhale, rock forward into your cow spine, arch the back, lift the chest. Use your arms to, assist the chest lifting, but then see if you can feel a little bit of engagement in your spinal muscles, right? And so just as the belly curves us in a cave, I believe, way. This will kind of arch the back and lift the chest. And you can do that from the arms, but you can also do that from the spinal muscles. So see how it feels like it's doing something. And then we'll do one more. So rounding the back. So you've got a little bit of gravity assistance here, but maybe a little bit of abdominal action as well, rounding the spine. And then as you inhale, arch the spine, lift the chest. See if you can activate the spine so that it's doing most of the arching and the arms are more of an assistant. And then come back to center, reach the arms straight up to the ceiling, take a breath in. As you exhale, twist. So left hand to the right knee, right hand behind you. Think about lifting the head up and then rotating around, right? We want to try to keep as much of that length in your spine as humanly possible. And just notice for yourself, does it feel relatively accessible to rotate to the right? Or are there little bits where you're like, oh, just that sticky spot, right? Like where do you feel movement and where do you feel stuck? Or where do you feel like your body's sort of like, well, that's it, right? There's an end point to some of these movements for a lot of us. And then go ahead, come back to center, reach the arms up to the ceiling, twist to the left. So the right hand comes down to the left knee, left hand behind you, you're rotating. And so this time, kind of same idea, notice where do you feel some good movement? Is there stickiness or is there just sort of an end point? And since this is our second side, you might notice, does it feel as twisty as the first side? Right? Most of us have one side that's a little bit more twisty than the other. And some of that's habit, some of that is structural, right? How you were built, how you grew up, right? So not everything in the body is able to be perfectly symmetric for a whole host of reasons. Inhale, reach the arms up to the ceiling. And then let's take a side bend. So the right hand comes down, left arm goes up and over. We're not going to hang out too long in here. And so just kind of notice, where do you feel your side bend coming from? Is it your lower waist, your rib cage, or your armpit? Of those three, right? We'll just give three options for a sensation, right? Is there awareness in any of those? And which one is it the most sort of loud? Take a breath in as you come back up to the ceiling. Exhale, left hand comes down, right arm goes up and over. Side bending to the left. Same question, lower waist, rib cage, armpit. Who is giving your brain the most kind of talkativeness in the body? And then as you inhale, come back up to the center. And let's come into hands and knees on your mat. If you're someone who has sensitive knees, you can place one of your blankets underneath your knees. That's always great. If not, you can just place your blanket off to the side. As you set up on your hands and your knees, place your shoulders kind of at the back end of your wrist so that we're not overstressing the wrist joint. And then when you're ready, take a breath in, look forward, arch the back a bit. And as you exhale, round the back into your cat spine. Inhale, arch forward. Exhale, round. And so now that the legs aren't crossed underneath us in a sitting position, notice if this cat-cow feels a little easier than the first cat-cow, or maybe you're just feeling tension in different areas, right? Going back and forth, inhaling to cow, exhaling to cat, following your breath. And again, we're in search of information about ourselves. We're trying our best just to kind of notice things. And sometimes we notice things where we're like, yep, that's my judgment right there. That's my desire. And sometimes we're like, oh, didn't know I was so interested in the sensation in my abdomen when I'm in cow spine. It's stretching, right? We're like, oh, I didn't know that I don't really feel much in cat spine. I wonder what should be happening. Let's come last time to your cow spine. Take a breath in. Tuck your toes, lift your hips, downward facing dog. Keep your knees bent for this first one. It's going to be a little bit of a short downward dog because we came from hands and knees. But for a moment, just kind of move your hips a little bit to the right and a little bit to the left, just to sort of find where your center is. You might also find that as you move your hips a little bit from one side to the other, that you get a nice kind of stretch sensation through your side body. And then when you're feeling ready to find your center, come to center, keep the knees bent. Inhale, come forward to plank position. And if you feel like your shoulders get too far past your wrists, walk your feet back a little bit so that the wrists are, relatively happy. Take a breath in. Exhale, keep your hands and your feet where they're at. Downward facing dog. Lift the hips. Again, go ahead, bend the knees, even if you've got really open hamstrings. And just kind of notice as you bend your knees, if you can feel your spine getting a little bit more kind of longer and neutral. And so a lot of us, when we straighten our legs, our tail sort of gets tethered downward towards our heels. And we want to allow the pelvis to roll forward over the thighs to bring our lower back into its natural curvature, which is going to feel a little bit like arching. Now, for those of you who are on the bendier side of life, notice if your ribs really want to flare forward, almost bringing your forehead to the ground, right? You want to contain your ribs up because the curve that's more like cow spine is in your lower back, but then we want to contain the ribs so that the upper back doesn't go into a full on back bend. And then you're pressing the arms down. Hopefully you're getting a little bit warm in your dog. And we'll come into child's pose. So knees come wide, toes together. You can keep your hands on the mat and just let your pelvis move back towards your heels and place your forehead on the ground. If your forehead doesn't touch the ground pretty easily, you can bring your hands back underneath your forehead and give them a little bit of a support, right? Either way. So taking a few moments here just to breathe and rest. If child's pose is not a restful position for you, that's okay. Just kind of breathe in it as its own individual yoga posture, right? This variation of the wide knee child's pose, it's a little bit more like, sort of more like how my dog stretches in her downward dog and a little bit less like an actual fetal position, right? So you can take that and feel armpits opening, hips folding deeply, head and neck relaxing down. The next time you inhale, come back onto your hands and knees, tuck your toes, lift your hips. Adho Mukha Svanasana, downward facing dog once again. And so, if you're ready to start straightening your legs a little bit in your dog, that's fine. But let's see if we can keep the primary kind of practice of downward dog about the spine lengthening as opposed to the hamstring opening or the calf opening, depending on your particular areas of tension. Next time you inhale, lift your heels up as high as they can go, so you're on the balls of your feet. Bend your knees, look forward, almost like you're like a spring about to be sprung, and then walk your feet all the way up to the top of your mat, bending your knees as you would like or need to, finding blocks underneath your hands if that's helpful or just comfortable, and then allowing your knees to bend enough so that your torso can rest on your thighs, so that your head can fully drop. You might even let your head kind of shake a little bit, no, as if you're unscrewing a light bulb. And then finding center, letting the skull really hang off of your shoulder girdle, right? In this position, hopefully because your torso is attached to your thighs, your spine can actually let go of tension because of the safety of the support of your thighs. Just notice if that's possible. Next time you inhale, come into a flat back. You could bring your hands to your shins if you want, or your hands on the blocks or the floor, either way. You can also keep your knees bent and find a little bit more of that kind of long spine that we found in downward dog. That would be perfectly fine. Exhale, lengthen the legs as much as you'd like to, fold all the way forward. Find that head drop once more. Then we'll come up to stand. So inhale, reach the arms out to the side, up to the ceiling, upward hand pose. Push the feet down really strongly, almost like you were trying to mold your feet into the floor. And as your feet go down, see if you can allow your rib cage to lift up and out of the waist a little bit, just enough to get some space for all of the guts, the stomach, the liver, the intestines. And then exhale, let your arms come down by your sides, mountain pose. Just for a moment, stand. You could open the eyes, close the eyes. Try to let the eyeballs be soft, regardless of what the eyelids are doing. And just take a quick moment to check in. Notice how you're feeling and standing, tired, energized, clear about where you are in space and time, or a little bit kind of dissociated and unsure. If you need a kind of a focusing point, breath, always a good one, right? Watching the inhale come in, watching the inhale go out, and trying to stay as much with your experience as possible so that we're really kind of seeking out that exploration of the body and the mind and how they are fully related and informing of one another. So we're going to start with some half sun salutations. As you inhale, circle the arms out to the side, up to the ceiling. Again, actively push the feet down. So there's some energy going down through the legs as the arms go up. You might even look up towards the hands. Exhale, dive forward over the legs, standing forward, bend. Legs could be bent or straight. Inhale, flat back, chest moves forward. Exhale, fold all the way back down. Inhale, reach the arms out to the side, up to the ceiling, upward hand pose. Exhale, mountain pose, arms by your sides. And so seeing if you can really match breath with movement. Inhale, lift the arms. You finish the inhale at the very top. Exhale, dive forward over the legs, standing forward, bend. Inhale, flat back, chest moves forward. Exhale, fold all the way back down. Inhale, reach the arms out to the side, up to the ceiling, Urdhva Hastasana, upward hand pose. Exhale, mountain pose, arms by your sides. We're gonna do one more just like that. Inhale, lift the arms up, breathe in. Exhale, dive all the way forward, arms go out to the side and then to the blocks to protect the lower back. Inhale, flat back, chest moves forward. Exhale, fold. Inhale, reach the arms out to the side, up to the ceiling, upward hand pose, Urdhva Hastasana. Exhale, mountain pose. All right, let's do some step backs. Inhale, lift the arms. Maybe do a tiny back bend at the top, lifting the chest as well. Exhale, dive forward over the legs, standing forward, bend. I like blocks for this if you're open to that. Inhale, flat back. Blocks can be on any height. Bend your knees, hands on block. Step your left foot back, low lunge. Take a nice big step back so that you're in kind of the length that you would be in plank position. And so if you are using blocks, what's nice about it is you can slide them back a little bit and allow your fingers to hang off the blocks. That decreases the stress on the wrist, which is really nice. And it also lifts you up away from your right thigh just a little bit more, of course, than if your hands were on the floor. And so if you want to exaggerate that, or if you feel like you want some more space to breathe, you just turn your blocks up a step higher to their medium height, which is a different feeling. So if you have your blocks, go ahead, try that. See what it feels like to be even a little bit higher. It doesn't make the pose, quote unquote, easier. It's just a different level of kind of compression of torso to thigh. And then just for fun, right? Go ahead, lift your block up onto the highest heights. Again, fingers kind of draping off the front to decrease wrist stress. And notice what that feels like. And of course, probably wouldn't do downward dog on a block this high, but for low lunge and stepping forward and back, this can be, well, really low lunge. And then you have to move the block to step forward and back. This can be really nice. And so pick your block height that you want to work in at the moment. So I'm going to turn my blocks down. And we've been in this low lunge for now a few moments, but we're going to stay here just a smidge longer. As you are bending your right knee forward, hopefully your right arm is either in contact with or pretty darn close to your right knee. And what would be interesting to think about is if your arm is underneath your shoulder, but your right knee is kind of aiming towards your left arm, could we align the right knee so that the kneecap is pointing over the second or third toe? And maybe even press the right knee and the right arm into one another. And what you might feel potentially is that as you do that, your hips sort of swing a little bit to the left, and it orients your right butt or your right sit bone directly back towards the back of your mat. Now, if you do that and you get some pinching in the front of the hip, that's good information to have, right? Maybe doing a little bit of kind kind of quad stretching could help that, but kind of stick with that just for a little bit longer. So your right knee is pushing into your right arm, and then can you fire up the back leg a little bit more? It should be getting a little tired, potentially, depending on your own personal quad strength at this point. And so we're gonna move out of this momentarily. All right, take one more breath in. As you exhale, we're gonna take the blocks off to the side and step back to downward facing dog. Just notice how the legs feel. Does one feel different than the other? Different could be lighter versus heavier. Different could be more kind of flexible than the other, right? Stretchier. Different could also feel warmer than the other. And it might surprise you, right? What certain movements do to downward facing dog, right? Sometimes engaging muscles actually open our legs up a little bit more than just stretching them. Inhale, come forward to plank position. Exhale, lower your knees. As you inhale, shift your shoulders over your fingertips as you bend your elbows and very slowly lower yourself down. Watch the shoulders so that they stay back. Inhale, baby cobra, curl the chest forward and up. Exhale, lower down. Take a breath in at the bottom, engage the lower abs a little bit, and then exhale, press straight up onto hands and knees, trying to keep the shoulders wide. Tuck the toes, lift the hips, downward facing dog. Take a few breaths here, pushing through the arms, lifting the sits bones upwards so that the pelvis kind of tips over the thigh bones. And again, for some of you who are kind of bendy, feel the containment of the front ribs just so that we don't over express the back bend in your mid back. We're looking more for neutral spine here. As you inhale, lift the heels up nice and high. Bend the knees as you look forward, and then walk your feet all the way up to the top of your mat. Find your blocks under your hands if you're using them. As you inhale, come into a flat back. Exhale, fold all the way down. Inhale, reach the arms out to the side, up to the ceiling, upward hand pose. Exhale, mountain pose, Tadasana. Inhale, lift the arms. Maybe look up if you would like to have that small back bend at the top. Exhale, dive forward over your legs, standing forward bend. Inhale, flat back, chest moves forward. Exhale, bend your knees, step the right foot back, nice distance towards sort of that plank length for your low lunge. You might slide the blocks, back a little bit so that your hands can have the fingers draping over the front of the block. And here we are in that low lunge. And so just like we did on the first side, let's experiment a little bit if you have blocks with what it feels like to be at different heights. So perhaps you start at the lowest level, right? And kind of notice what you feel there, right? How smushed is your torso into your thigh? And, is that a sensation that can you crave, right? Sometimes there's some discussion about compression of the belly into the thigh as being helpful for digestion. So on this side, it would be your lower intestine, or your descending intestine of your colon. I'm not sure there's actually evidence to support that, but it's nice to know the abdominal anatomy. And then let's see what happens if we flip the blocks up. So mid height, maybe a little bit less compression. Might even have a little bit more access to pushing with the hands, because as the torso rises above the thigh a bit, you can't lie on the thigh quite as much, right? Which we all do, right? When there's an opportunity to do less, the body usually takes it, right? And in yoga, we want to choose when to do effortful things and when to do more restful things. And then go ahead, flip your blocks up one more height. So now they're on their highest point. And again, this might feel like you've got even more access to your arms, a little bit more spaciousness to breathe. And maybe this is the place where you want to work in your your low lunge, right? And so choose your block height, right? I'm going to flip back down to my lowest because that's where I did my first side on. And then Again, we're going to try to find left arm and left leg in contact with one another. And they should be kind of snugged up so that when you push your left knee into your left arm and vice versa, that your knee still is aiming relatively straight forward, right? We don't want to have the arm out so far that the knee sort of turns and the big toe lifts up. And so as you're aligning yourself, think knee over second or third toe, arm and knee pressing together so that it's keeping that alignment. And then just notice as you press the knee and the arm into one another, is your pelvis swinging a tiny bit over to the right? And we're talking really small movements, right, for a lot of us. And so as that happens, is the left buttock and sit bone aiming a little bit more directly back or even a little bit towards your right foot, right? That sensation of a little bit of that cross relationship. And then can the right leg fire up a little bit more? It might be getting a little tired. And so, you just acknowledge what's possible. And you say, okay, that's what my body can do right now. All right, and then we're gonna come back to down dog. So go ahead and take the blocks off to the side. Step the left foot back, downward facing dog. And again, just for a moment, notice how the legs feel either similarly or distinctly from each other. Knees can, of course, still be bent or they might be starting to straighten at this point, right? Depending on how your body's feeling. And even if you're someone who's pretty flexible, there are days that you may find a bent-legged down dog just feels like the right thing to do, right? And developing that little bit of interoception or that body language can be really good. As you inhale, come forward to plank position. Exhale, lower your knees. Inhale, shift your shoulders past your fingertips as the elbows bend to lower your torso and your belly slowly to the ground. Inhale, baby cobra. Find your spine activating or your spinal muscles activating to lift your chest up. Exhale, lower. Take a breath in at the bottom and then exhale, press up and back, hands and knees. Tuck the toes, lift the hips, downward facing dog. All right, inhale, lift your heels up nice and high, bend your knees, look forward, that kind of springy position. As you exhale, walk your feet forward to the top of your mat, perhaps grab your blocks once more if you like, or you might take the hands and just let them be on the floor for now. Inhale, reach the arms out to the side, up to the ceiling, upward hand pose, push the feet down, kind of re-ground them into the floor. Exhale, mountain pose. Inhale, lift the arms out to the side, up to the ceiling. We're gonna add on. Exhale, dive forward over the legs, standing forward bend. Maybe grab your blocks if you really liked them for your low lunge. Inhale, flat back, chest moves forward. Exhale, bend your knee, step your left foot back, low lunge. Now, go ahead and press your right knee into your right arm once more, just to kind of remind that outer hip to engage and to align the pelvis in a more squared off position. And then we're gonna take those arms up to the ceiling in your high lunge. So try to keep your right knee aligned exactly where it is. Fire your back leg up a little bit more. And we're gonna start to lift the torso up. Watch to make sure that that right knee doesn't kind of cave inwards, and bring the arms vertical alongside the ears, high lunge. Now that right leg no longer has its kind of partner, right, to keep it in alignment. And so you have to use the memory of that relationship to keep your knee pointing straight forward and not letting it dive in, as so many of us do, just because we don't have as much strength on the outer hip as potentially would be helpful. Make sure your back leg is still engaged, right? Really feel like your left thigh is tightening. Maybe even the left buttock could tighten if it wanted to assist with that back hip opening a little bit. And then depending on how you're feeling, you might try to bend your front knee a smidge more and just kind of notice what that feels like. Does that feel appropriate for what you're working with this evening or this daytime or whenever you're practicing? Or does that feel like not the right thing? As you exhale, bring your hands down around your blocks or your foot. Take a breath and look forward, low lunge. And then exhale, lift the hips, start to straighten through the front leg, Parshvottanasana, pyramid pose. And you might bow forward with your torso, that's fine. Or you might just keep your spine long, which is also fine, right? Wherever you feel that you can breathe a bit, right? So we're gonna go back and forth. Inhale, bend the front knee, low lunge, make sure the back leg doesn't slacken. And then exhale, start to lengthen through the front leg. Maybe you bow, maybe you don't. Maybe the front knee stays a little bit bent, maybe it straightens all the way. Inhale, bend the front knee, look forward. Exhale, pull the hips back. Parshvottanasana, straightening through the front leg as much as it's willing or wants to. Inhale, bend the front knee, low lunge. Exhale, lengthen. Inhale, bend the knee, low lunge, and then back to downward dog. Take the blocks away, step the right foot back, Adho Mukha Svanasana. Inhale, come forward to plank. Exhale, lower the knees. Again, shift the shoulders forward as you breathe in and very slowly try to control the descent. We're hoping that the belly and the chest land at the same time, theoretically. Inhale, come to your baby cobra. We're gonna pause here for a moment and just think about, you might need to lower a little bit just to take some of the intensity out, or you might fire up the spinal muscles even a little bit more. But can you take your awareness to your legs and see if they're sort of wilted onto the ground, right? Can the legs reach back on the ground, right? They're not floating. This isn't locust pose, right? Or Shalambhasana. This is still baby Bhujangasana or cobra, right? But can the legs be a part of this? So legs go back, chest goes forward. And we're sort of trying to stretch your snake into a little bit more length as the chest curls forward and up. It should help decompress the lower back just a little bit and help the body feel integrated. Legs back, chest forward. Arms are really just for placement. They're not doing a ton. And then exhale, lower the forehead down. Take a breath in, feel the lower belly engage, and then nice and slow, exhale, push up onto hands and knees. Tuck the toes, lift the hips, downward facing dog. 3 breaths here, breathing in through the nose if you can. Breathing out through the mouth if your jaw is kind of clenched, or out through the nose if that feels better. Either's good. In through the nose if possible. Out through something. And then once more, inhale through the nose. And out through the nose or mouth. Inhale, lift your heels up nice and high, bend your knees, look forward. Exhale, walk your feet all the way up to the top of the mat, standing forward bend. Maybe the blocks come back underneath your hands. Inhale, flat back, chest moves forward. Exhale, fold. Inhale, reach your arms out to the side, up to the ceiling, upward hand pose, push the feet down, lift the ribs away from the pelvis. Notice how this is kind of like what we were looking at in baby cobra, but just standing, right? The legs go one way, the chest goes the other way. Mountain pose, arms by your sides. Inhale, lift the arms. Maybe take it into that back bend as you go into upward hand pose. Exhale, dive forward over your legs, standing forward bend. Inhale, flat back, chest moves forward. Exhale, bend your knee, step your right foot back, low lunge. Find the connection between your left knee and your left arm to kind of help align your pelvis. And then keep your left knee nice and stable as best you can. Start to lift your arms up towards the ceiling, high lunge. And then maybe just take a look at your left knee, see how it's doing. You might see some wobbling. You might see some wobbling at the ankle or the knee. You might even feel wobbling up at the pelvis or the torso, right? All's good. That's your kind of adapting complex. That's excellent. But see if you can kind of remember what it felt like to squeeze the outer glute back a little bit, where the left butt was aiming straight back towards the end of the mat, or maybe even a little bit over to the right heel. Maybe, if it feels appropriate, bend the left knee a little bit more. Can you engage your right thigh more clearly? And as you engage the right thigh more clearly, can the glute also engaged so that we don't fully collapse in the lower spine, right? We're trying to get that leg back from the hip joint. The spine will also participate, right? But we want it to be a collective experience, not a spinal experience. So hip and spine all together. One more breath in. Exhale, bring the hands down around your front foot. Take the blocks off to the sides, step back, downward facing dog. And so you'll notice that we use down dog as a base. You can also always come to child's pose or just in hands and knees, totally fine. Down dog isn't necessarily a rest. It's just a place to kind of recollect. Inhale, come forward to plank. Exhale, lower the knees. Inhale, shift the shoulders forward over the fingertips. Slowly bend the elbows, lower the chest and the belly down. Now, stretch back through the legs first, then curl your chest forward and up, baby cobra. And again, we're gonna hang out here for a few moments, trying to feel the combination of legs reaching back, a little bit of glute activation on, chest reaching forward. And so this dichotomy of the body moving energetically in two different directions is all over the yoga practice. It gives us the balance, it gives us the stability and the tension that we need to hold things, but it also gives us kind of this kind of integrative, energetic experience where we're trying to link the body and the brain very clearly with one another. Exhale, lower the face. Take a breath in. Exhale, gather the low belly, press up hands and knees. Tuck the toes, lift the hips, downward facing dog. 2 breaths, breathing in. Breathing out. Maybe breathing in again. Hopefully, breathing out. This time when you inhale, lift the heels nice and high, bend your knees, look forward. Exhale, walk your feet all the way up to the top of your mat. Maybe the blocks come back underneath your hands. Maybe they don't. Inhale, flat back, chest moves forward. Exhale, fold all the way back down, drop the head. Inhale, reach the arms out to the side, up to the ceiling, upward hand pose. Exhale, mountain pose. Adding on again, inhale, lift the arms. Again, push the feet down, lift the chest up. Exhale, dive forward over the legs, standing forward bend. Inhale, flat back, chest moves forward, blocks underneath the hands if you like. Bend the knee, step the left foot back, stabilize the right knee, rise up, high lunge right away. And just kind of notice, do you feel wobbly? Do you feel pretty good? And by good, I mean stable, right? Now we're gonna come into warrior 2. So your left heel is gonna spin down, your hips are gonna start to turn to the left and your arms come parallel to the floor, right? That's the basics. Warrior 2 gets a lot more complicated, but we're gonna start there. Now, take your eyes, look down at your back foot. That back foot should be slightly, very slightly angled forward to the top of your mat. If it's straight, kind of towards the side of your mat, we don't get the natural rotation of the hip, and then the hip kind of feels less integrated with the body, at least in my experience as a teacher and a student. And so think about pointing your toes just a few degrees up towards maybe the left corner of your mat. So that's that leg. And then see if you can actually think about rolling your left inner thigh back, whoops, a little bit. Might push over if you're actually doing it. That's totally fine. Okay, so you got the back leg. Now let's think about the front leg. It's the same thing as your low lunge and your high lunge. Knee is pointing straight forward over the second or third toe. Imagining you had another arm down on the block that your knee and your arm could push together to help engage the outer right hip. Sometimes, well, frequently, I think being an octopus would be very useful as both a teacher, a student, and a physical therapist, right? Okay, so we've got left leg spiraling inward, right leg aligning straight forward. Now you might notice that your hips are not straight to the side, right? If you are someone who is that hypermobile, right, we actually want to contain some of that mobility. Your hips are likely pointing slightly up towards the left corner of your mat, and that's great. But can you turn your chest squared to the side of your mat and then extend your arms? looking forward over your right hand. And so the beauty of Warrior Two is it's all of these paradoxical twists and spirals and engagements, which makes it a very vibrant pose, but also a pose that can have a lot of questions, right? And so as you stay in this position, notice kind of who gets tired, right? Is it your right outer hip? Does your torso start to sort of veer forward? Can the torso stay facing straight to the side so that the torso is activated in that place? And can you breathe, right? A lot of yoga asks us to breathe in areas of challenge, we'll call them. And so can you breathe here while you're working with that inward spiral of your back leg, that alignment of your front knee where it's still pointing straight forward and not caving into the left, torso squaring to the side of your mat, even though the pelvis is not. One more breath in. As you exhale, straighten your front leg, lift your arms straight up to the ceiling, and we're gonna pivot. I'll move this block so you can see. Pivot your right foot 90 degrees, and then just kind of nudge your left foot so that both toes are facing the side of your mat now. You can bring your hands to your hips, straighten your knees all the way just for a moment. And can you feel the full foot grounding? Now you're quite wide, and that's fine, but can you feel a little bit of kind of feet pressing down and grabbing into the floor, or maybe impressing themselves into the floor? And can there also be a sense of a little bit of lift from the thighs into the pelvis, so we're not just kind of dumping down, right? Hands on the hips. As you inhale, push the hips down a little bit to help lift the chest, feet still grounding. And then as you exhale, you might bend your knees a bit. You could bring your fingertips to the floor. This would be a good time to grab blocks and put them underneath your hands for Prasarada Padottanasana. Straddle, standing straddle. Now, if your knees are bent, that's fine. And if there's any discomfort, especially on the inner knees, you could always bring your feet a little bit closer together so that you're not quite as wide, right? That would be a great modification or adjustment. If you're in your full stance and your knees are bent, that's great. We just want to keep the outer and inner heels on your feet grounded. Now, if you're someone who can straighten your legs, you could keep your hands on the blocks, that's great. If you want to take it into your full forward bend and you don't want to use blocks, you could bring the hands back underneath the feet. Maybe the head gets to the ground, right? So much of that is about how, your proportions are made and what you are naturally able to do with hip mobility, right? This isn't necessarily a goal, right? Notice for yourself, like, is it a goal to get your head on the ground? And if that is a goal, right, how attached are you to that? And can we almost say, okay, yep, goal attached. Well, that's some awareness. That's great. But then can we shift a little bit after acknowledging that into, but what does it feel like, right? Does it feel like stretch? Does it feel like kind of folding somewhere? Does it feel dangerous, right? Are there little signals saying, hey, don't overdo it? We don't get to be in this position super frequently, so maybe you back off a little bit. Take 2 more breaths right where you're at. And then as you inhale, reach your chest forward, come into your flat back. Again, maybe your hands are on blocks. Right, come into your flat back, breathe in. Exhale, bring your hands onto your hips, maybe bend your knees a little bit and stand all the way up. We're gonna come back to Warrior Two. So first, turn your right foot forward to face the front of your mat. And then remember, we turn that back foot in a little bit. So you're gonna pivot your left foot slightly into internal rotation, arms parallel to the floor, bend your front knee, torso square to the side of the mat, pelvis, probably not. Just refind that. Eventually this front knee is 90 degrees, but different days, different amounts. And then we're gonna come to low lunge. So if your blocks like mine are on the side of your mat, just gonna kind of bend down and grab them, put them around my front foot and spin my back heel up. Take a breath and look forward in your low lunge. Bend your back knee a little bit to give you a little assistance, and then take a big step forward, standing forward bend. Inhale, flat back, chest moves forward. Exhale, fold. Inhale, reach your arms out to the side, up to the ceiling, upward hand pose. Maybe take a little back bend at the top because you just did a forward bend. Exhale, mountain pose. Right, let's do the other side. Inhale, lift the arms, Urdhva Hastasana. Exhale, dive forward over your legs, standing forward bent. Inhale, flat back, chest moves forward. Exhale, bend your knees, step your right foot back, low lunge. Inhale, high lunge, reaching the arms up to the ceiling. I have a sneaking suspicion that I did not do Parshvottanasana on the first side. So let's just go back and do it. And if you get a double round of Parshvottanasana on the left, that's probably not a bad thing. So you're in your low lunge, look forward, take a breath in, and then exhale, pull the hips back as much as they're able to, bow forward. Inhale, low lunge. Exhale, fold. Inhale, low lunge. Exhale, Parshvottanasana, pyramid pose. Last one, inhale, low lunge. And exhale, fold. All right, moving to high lunge. Inhale, bend your front knee. Exhale, rise up, high lunge. Now, keep your left knee facing forward. We're gonna come to warrior two. So your back heel spins down, but just watch that front knee, make sure it doesn't travel. And then bring your arms parallel to the floor. And then we'll kind of scan your warrior two, just like we did on the first side. So take your eyes, look back at your back foot, and notice, are your toes pointing directly to the side of your mat, or are they slightly inwardly angled? See if you can have that right heel just slightly back further than your toes, helping to find that inward rotation of your thigh bone. So it would be kind of rolling the inner thigh back a little bit. Front knee stable over your front foot, which should have a little bit of engagement of your left buttock. Pelvis is likely not square to the side, and everyone's going to have a different angle, which is why I don't say it should be facing this direction. We all have different pelvises. We all have different thigh bones. And so your pelvis placement is informed by the engagement of your legs, right? So we've got the pelvis placed as it is consequently from the thighs, and then take your torso, or your chest rather, and let your chest square towards the side of your mat. And it's kind of a lovely little twist against, in particular, that back leg. Arms parallel to the floor, eyes go forward. So you've got pelvis a little bit forward, chest clear to the side, head a little forward. So there's this nice weaving of right, left of the body. Couple more breaths here, pushing the feet down. Noticing, what do you feel? And maybe what do you think? Right? What's the commentary? Is it helpful? Or is it just commentary? As you inhale, straighten the front leg. You're going to turn your left toes to meet the right side of your mat and just adjust your right foot. Hands on the pelvis. You're going to push the feet down so that they're nice and grounded. Lift the chest up a little bit. And as you exhale, bend the knees, maybe bow forward. Maybe the hands come to blocks underneath your shoulders, right? If you need to bring your feet a little closer, that's great. If you don't want them that wide. If you're wide, also great. You can choose bent kneed or straight legged, regardless of the width of your legs. And then again, if you are bowing all the way forward, you're gonna walk your hands back, bring your head toward the ground. It may or may not get there, that's fine. Okay, if you've got a nice big ponytail like me, the floor is a little closer because there's some cushion there between my head and the floor via my hair, right? And then especially if you're, again, someone who's like pretty bendy, you wanna feel thigh engagement and a sense of
trying not to splay the sits bones too far apart, right? So a tiny bit of containment at the points that are most exposed or um, most asked to be stretched, just so that there's a little more choice and a little less overstretch or overstrain. Couple more breaths right here. And then as you inhale, flat back, bend the knees a little bit, walk your hands up onto your hips, stand all the way upright. All right, warrior two, left toes face forward, so they turn out 90 degrees. Back foot turns in maybe 5 or 10 degrees, so you have that internal spiral again. Chest faces square to the right side of your mat, arms parallel to the floor. Bend the front knee. This is called Virabhadrasana 2, warrior 2. Breathing. Kind of notice if it feels like you have really good access to breaths or if it feels just a little bit shortened. And we're going to come into your low lunge. So again, if you've got blocks on the side of your mat, go ahead and move them over. Turn your back heel up. You may need to adjust the length of your stance a little bit by hopping your back foot forward or sliding your front foot back. Either way, find your nice and clear low lunge. Take a breath in. And then as you bend your back knee to step forward, exhale, push off the back foot. Find your standing forward bend and fold. Inhale, flat back, chest moves forward. Exhale, fold all the way back down. Inhale, reach your arms out to the side and up to the ceiling, upward hand pose. Exhale, mountain pose. Okay, so we're gonna do some seated things. So I recommend finding that blanket stack again, whether it's one that's folded or multiple, right? And so I'm going to fold mine, so it's just a little bit thicker than when I started on. And you're going to come to sit. I'll face you, but you can face the long length of your mat if you like as well. That's fine. We're going to come to Baddha Konasana. So soles of the feet together, knees apart. Now, if your knees allow, see how close you can bring your heels. If your knees don't allow, place your feet at a distance that it feels sustainable and something that you can sit with and breathe into, right? And so traditionally, your feet would be pretty much like at the pelvic floor of the perineum, right? But that requires a significant amount of knee bend and a certain pliability of the muscular tissue, right? And the fascial tissue. And so if you are someone who has really strong calves that are, we call it hypertrophied in physical therapy. So there's a lot of density to the muscles, as you gain strength in some bodies, because every body builds muscle with a kind of a different stickiness, so to speak. But if you have really strong calf muscles, they may actually get in the way, quote unquote, get in the way. They're preventing a really deep knee fold because you just have stronger calf muscles or you just have a little bit more calf tissue. And so then your feet may be, 4 or 5 or 6 more inches away from your pelvis. Totally fine, right? What we're really looking for is that compression between the calf and the knee. Now, alternatively, if you have knee stuff in terms of pain or surgery or those kind of things, the deep fold of the knee may be uncomfortable, and that's okay too. You slide your knees forward to unbend the knee a little bit. You could even take a couple of blocks to support the knee so that the knee doesn't feel like it's twisting at all, right? So that's great as well. So this kind of open hipped diamond position, whether it's a long diamond or whether it's kind of a smooshed diamond, both are good. The smooshed diamond is what we would consider Baddha Konasana, right? Cobbler's pose, because you could put a shoe there and work on it, right? Which is what cobblers would do. If you're in a slightly longer diamond pose, this is more Tarasana or seat of Tara, right? I'm not sure if it's white taro or green taro, but for our purposes, I'm not sure it matters at the moment. Okay, once you're there, just being in that position is a practice in and of itself. Just sitting upright and being in this open hipped, externally rotated kind of butterfly position, right? If you would like to bend forward, right, you're welcome to bow forward and just notice, because I always think this is fascinating. When you bow forward, do you pitch your spine forward where it's almost a straight spine and you're just pitching over your legs, right? As if your head could go, far beyond your toes. Or when you bow forward, do you sort of round your spine, almost like a cat spine, where your head is more aiming at your feet, especially if your feet are quite close to your pelvis. There are benefits to both. And so for now, without any instruction, just notice, what do you do naturally? And is it a choice? Or is it, well, this is how my body can bend forward, right? Is it more of a structure? I just kind of notice. And if you are making the choice, just kind of be like, what comes of that choice? Do you find some sensation of stretch? Do you find some sensation of groundedness, right? Does it feel like a safe stretch? Right, from what we know with pain science, really what we're talking about in terms of finding safety and discomfort is being able to tell the brain, like, hey, you have a choice of to stay in this or get out of it, and it's not harmful, right? Pain often comes from when we perceive something as threatening or dangerous, and that we have to make grander choices to keep ourselves safe, like running away, those kind of things. And so in yoga, when you find yourself in areas that have, potential discomfort or struggle, we want to approach those with this idea, like, you always have a choice to come out of it, right? I tend to talk a lot in poses, as you might have noticed, right? And so you can always rest. But we want to make sure that the body knows, like, hey, like, not all sensations are comfortable, but also discomfort does not equal danger. You can be very safe in discomfort with education, experience, and an attunement to how your nervous system is doing. Great, and then Koi, come on up to sit. We've been here for a bit, right? So take your hands on the outside of your knees. Use your hands to close your legs together like a book. And then we're going to slide your legs forward into Paschimottanasana. Paschimottanasana is a forward bend over, straight-ish legs. If, I'm going to turn to this side so that you can see this, if when you sit on your blanket or on the floor, okay, and it is a position where if you have straight legs, you're sort of rounding back. Do you see how my spine is behind my pelvis? If that's the case for you, bend your knees so that you can get your spine vertical, and then see if you can bend forward from there. And you may not, again, totally fine, right? Forward bends are sticky on a lot of people for a lot of reasons, and they're not all muscular. And so you might take your hands behind your thighs and sort of round forward, right? Maybe you don't let your head touch something, that's fine. Maybe your head can kind of touch into your kneecaps, also fine. You could also stack your hands on top of your kneecaps, that's great, right? If you're someone who can sit up vertically with straight legs, you can also bend forward. And again, just notice, are you pitching or are you rounding? I'm not going to necessarily ask for one versus the other in this particular practice, but just kind of notice what you're doing. And then regardless of your knee position, how much is it possible to let your head drop? And it might be not possible. And that's okay. That's where stacking something underneath your head, like your arms, or even taking a block and putting it underneath your forehead, can just be so nice to help your neck really relax. Right? So that's first investigation. I always like having something under my head in forward bends if it's if it's possible, because then the muscles in the back of my neck and in the front of my neck are not contracting in an on guard position. They actually have an opportunity also to lengthen because they're not trying to make sure that my head doesn't fall off, right? Which is part of their job. Second thing to investigate, foot position, right? So are you someone in this position, whether or not your knees are bent or straight, do you allow your feet to sort of point a little bit, even if it's not like a full dancer point, ballet point, I should say, even if it's just sort of like a toes flop away from the knees. Right? So notice that. And then depending on, what your curiosity is, you could play with pulling your toes back toward your head, which often increases sensation, sometimes behind the knees, sometimes in the calf, sometimes even up the spine or into the neck. Right? And so we can consider this not only a muscle stretch, muscle being calves, hamstrings, spinal extensors, right? Those muscles that run along your spine that keep you upright. We could also consider this a little bit of a nerve opening or a spinal cord sheath opening, right? And for some people, this gets nice and tight. If, as you're here, you're getting numbness or tingling, just be really gentle about that. So if you're someone who's getting numbness and tingling, you might allow those toes to kind of point forward because we're not necessarily trying to do like a nerve stretch, so to speak, in like a therapeutic way. If you're having your feet flex back and you're just sort of like, oh, it's kind of interesting, you're welcome to stay there, right? But we just want to approach these things with a lot of generosity and a lot of compassion so that we don't overdo. I come from the school of yoga, of the middle path school, which is why I kind of fell in love with the practice. And we're going to stay here for another minute or so. So, do what you can to support yourself. And so with this idea that came out of the Om Yoga School in New York City, this idea of middle path is really like, don't do too much, don't do too little. And my teachers in particular of that school had a really lovely gentleness about meeting the body where it was the day that you practiced. And it's something that I think was really novel and really important, right? How do you approach your experience in movement with kindness and curiosity, as opposed to judgment and sort of blame in some ways or forcefulness? Okay, so let's come out of this. Now, if your head is on a block, you're going to take your head in one of your hands, take your other hand to the floor alongside your legs, and you're going to actually help your head come all the way upright so that those muscles in your neck don't have to fully fire again. You might feel just a smidge lightheaded from that. And so just remain in Dandasana. This is staff pose, upright vertical posture with your legs out straight. Just sort of let everything recalibrate. You might feel some residual sensation in different aspects of your body. Just maybe, notice those guys. Right. And then we'll do a twist before we come into Shavasana. If you know that you are someone who has some lower back talkativeness in your Shavasana, keep your blocks close so that you could potentially do Supta Baddha Konasana, and I'll talk you through that once we get there. You're going to come off of your blanket. You could just slide that blanket back as a head support. Carefully and gently lower yourself down. If you are going to use the blanket as head support, just make sure that it's not under your shoulders. It's just underneath your skull. And then those blocks that are the side of you, just in case, you want to make sure that they are not in your legs' way. You're going to take your arms out to the side. Shift your hips over to the right a little bit. And then we're going to bring your legs up and over to the left. Now, when you do that, see if you can fully stack your legs so that your ankles and your knees are right on top of each other. Now, that might pull your right shoulder off the ground, right? It's totally fine. If your right shoulder is off the ground, lift your right arm up higher so that we're not irritating the front of your right shoulder. Take your left hand on your top right thigh, a little bit of grounding, and then actively twist your chest, not your arm, but your chest towards the ceiling, and see if that starts to lower your right shoulder down. If it lowers it enough, you can lie your right arm back down on the ground. And at this point, it's okay if the knees unstack a little bit, right? Just kind of an interesting thing to be like, where are you twisting from? Are you twisting from the spine or the chest, or are you twisting from the hip, right? If you're really twisting from the spine, your pelvis would be vertically stacked, right? But that takes quite a bit of rotation, and a lot of us don't have it. That's fine. And we just need to figure out, how do we twist without putting so much pressure on the opening shoulder? We really want that shoulder to be relaxed and not pressing up to the ceiling, right? Shoulder doesn't really like that action. We want it to be dropped backwards where the pec has to stretch open. And then let's go to the other side. So you're going to bring your knees back up, kind of scoot your hips a little bit to the left, bring your knees all the way over to the right. And again, start by stacking the knees. You can even bring your whole torso over if that's helpful. And I like to have the knees at hip height so that they're not too low, right? So knees at hip height. And then right hand goes on top of the left thigh. Left arm maybe goes up to the ceiling. And then you're actively rotating your chest up to the ceiling. And the left arm is reaching out to the side as a consequence, right? It's not really the leader. It's more of the gesture in some ways, the end point. And then again, if your knees have to slide off of one another a little bit, that's fine. If your left shoulder can get to the floor, that's great. You can relax the arm. If it doesn't, just keep the arm active and integrated into the shoulder. And what I mean by that is trying not to let your left shoulder pop up to the ceiling, but instead pulling the left shoulder down, lifting the left hand up so that we keep the front of your left shoulder nice and integrated with the rest of the system. Okay, and then come back to the center. We're going to set up either for Shavasana or Supta Baddha Konasana. So if you're going to do a normal corpse pose or Shavasana, you can just slide your legs long, right? Maybe have the arms out to the side a little bit, maybe a 45-degree angle from your hip, right? So arm not shoulder height, but splitting the difference between being right next to your pelvis and being shoulder height, so 45 degrees. If this is a no-go for you, for whatever reason, you can bend your knees, grab a block for each knee, bring feet together, open the knees apart, and put blocks underneath your knees, or even better, kind of like the upper thigh, so that you are in that butterfly or cobbler position, supported. That's important. We want the legs fully supported. And so depending on where you are choosing to rest, both postures could have the arms out to the side. Both postures could also have the hands on the belly if that feels better. Just make sure you're warm enough. And so this is a great time just to kind of check in. And if you're already a little bit chilly, it might be a good idea to grab another blanket or a sweater or something. Socks are great for Shavasana to keep that distant point of your body warm, right? Kind of farthest thing away from your heart as a blood pumping organ. And then your eyes could be either softly open to the ceiling, particularly if that makes you feel a little bit safer in your space or a little bit more oriented. Traditionally, the eyes would start to learn to close as you're in Shavasana so that we reduce visual input to the brain to help the brain soften and quiet just a smidge. You might even imagine your brain sort of sliding back away from your eyeballs into the support of your blanket or your floor, and see if it can also have a moment to rest and restore. So we're going to hang out in Shavasana or your Supta Baddha Konasana for about 10 minutes. I'm going to give you some silence, and then we'll end practice after that. slowly bring your attention back to your breath. Maybe allow your head to rock a little bit from the right to the left, just to start to really gently bring some awareness back into the bones. Maybe even make some small movements with your fingers and your toes. Just like gently, not super aggressive. If you're in Supta Baddha Konasana with your knees on blocks, slide your hands down to the outer thighs and let your legs come together using your hands to help. If you're in Shavasana, bend your knees, gently step your feet to the floor one at a time. And then everyone can roll to their side and pause on their side body for a few moments just to resettle your whole system into the ground. On an exhale, press yourself up to sit. Use your hands to assist you. And then you can take a seat on a blanket or a block, just something where your pelvis is elevated. Crossing the legs, placing the hands on the thighs, letting the eyes either close fully or cast down to the floor. Feel the breath moving in and out of the whole body. Inhaling, bringing oxygen in. Exhaling, expelling out. Next time you inhale, bring the hands to prayer, Anjali Mudra, thumbs resting on the chest. Exhale, bow your head down towards the fingertips. Act of gratitude for taking time to practice. May all beings be happy. May all beings be healthy. May all beings be free from suffering. May all beings be safe. Namaste.